There's so much information and misinformation out there, and it is often this information overload that keeps people from recovering. But what if I told you that the most successful path to recovery for many people could be distilled down to one single sentence? Spoiler alert, it can. And that's what I'm going to share with you in this video. The benefit of studying something so in depth, like I have with ME/CFS and long COVID recovery, is that you get to know it well. And when you know it this well, you have the ability to explain it really simply. After growing up with a mother who had CFS and then living with this condition myself for 10 years before fully recovering, and then in the 5 years since recovering, I've been interviewing people every single week. I've done over 220 recovery interviews and counting, including experts and doctors. And I've also read all the books and listened to all the podcasts and talked to hundreds, probably thousands more in DMs and emails and in all of my social spaces. And the result of all of this is that I am up to speed. I get it. So in this video, you're going to see what is probably the shortest recovery video you'll ever watch on this topic. It's going to be the most bang for your buck. Just all killer, no filler. So let's do this. So this video is for people who are facing chronic conditions like ME/CFS and long COVID and who have already started with their doctor and ruled out any structural causes. And research shows that in the majority of cases when symptoms are chronic, even when tests and scans do show some abnormalities, it quite often still all boils down to this. Here's your one sentence. Your symptoms started because of an assessment by your brain detecting an emotional or a physical threat, and fear is the fuel that makes these symptoms become chronic, meaning that how you respond to your symptoms determines if they persist, get worse, or if they go away. It's a long sentence, but it's one sentence. So let's break down the three components of that sentence. So the first part, your symptoms started as a result of a threat assessment. So your brain and your nervous system are constantly on the lookout for threats. And whether it's an emotional threat or a physical threat, it's the exact same neural pathways in your brain that are enacted. It processes it the same ways and has the same arsenal of symptoms at its disposal that it uses as tools to alert you to what's going on. Sometimes it's a real threat, and sometimes it's a miscommunication. Miscommunications can and do happen in your body. But whatever the situation, it is an attempt to alert you to some danger, to get your attention, and to protect you. And the second part of that sentence, so symptoms stuck around because of fear. So fear is the fuel that keeps those symptoms going. As long as your body still thinks there's a threat and your fear is telling them there is still a threat, those symptoms will persist. My favorite example of this comes from Alan Gordon's book, The Way Out. He talks about someone who was working on a construction site. They got a large nail through their boot because they stepped on it. The person was screaming in pain, rushed to the hospital. Doctors carefully removed the boot, only to determine that there was no damage to the person's foot. The nail had gone between their toes, not a scratch on him. And the second that this injured person saw that his foot was fine, the pain disappeared. The fear was gone, so the symptom stopped. And then the third part of that sentence builds directly on the part right before it. How do we get symptoms to stop? What's going to happen to them depends on your reaction. This is where people can get in a downward symptom spiral to the point of being bedbound. You have more symptoms, you have more fear and panic, which brings on more symptoms, which brings on more fear and panic, where you get to a point where you can't do virtually anything because your brain and nervous system is sure that something catastrophic is happening. And then you respond with terror, understandably, reinforcing that that's what's going on. So the goal is to respond to your symptoms with neutrality. You can notice them, but you don't get alarmed by them. You don't go into panic. You don't fixate on them. You don't focus on them. You don't frantically try and fix them. You just accept that they're there and you know that everything's fine and that you trust that once your nervous system and brain get this message, that they will go away. Two recent interviews that I did really break all of this down really well, and I'll link them both in the video description because they are a must watch. The first one is with Dr. Howard Schubiner. He is a guru in this space and knows the science of all of this inside and out. And in his interview, he talks about the first two components of this sentence I've shared with you and breaks down the science in a really easy to understand way. And the second interview is with a woman named Adrienne Sist. She had her own remarkable recovery, and she did it using a program called CFS Recovery. And in this program, she talked about how they have something called the golden rule of recovery. And this was focusing on the third part of that sentence, where how well you react to symptoms determines your rate of recovery. So all of this is actually quite simple when you break it down. But the process of working through it is not easy. The good news is that there are a ton of recovery programs out there with a ton of overlap. They're all working off of the same science. So they're going to have different versions of more or less the same thing. Some will have a little bit of support, some will be fancy and have a ton of hands-on support, but you don't actually need any sort of recovery program to get past this. One thing that people I interview talk about a lot is that they used an app called Curable. It's a science-based app to get rid of chronic pain. But even Curable, when you listen to their podcast and look at all their many resources, are now talking about many other symptoms that we're discovering that this now applies to. So I've got an affiliate link for Curable that gives you 6 weeks for free. So I'll put that in the video description. And you can probably learn everything that you need to know in that 6 weeks. It teaches you the science, and then it gives you a bunch of brain retraining tools that walks you through how to do them. And many people tell me that they learn everything they need to know just from using the app. Thank you for watching. If you do give Curable a try, let me know in the comments how it goes, or if you're already using it, I'd love to hear your experience. And I hope to see you in this next video.